On the night of August 20th, 1989, in a mansion in Beverly Hills, California, Jose and Kitty Menendez were sitting in the den watching television. Jose was eating berries. Kitty was beside him. It was a Sunday night. They were at home. They were safe. Their two sons, Lyle, age 21, and Erik, age 18, walked into that room carrying 12-gauge Mossberg shotguns. They fired 15 shots. Jose was hit 6 times. Kitty was hit 9 times. She tried to run. She was shot in the face at close range. Neither parent survived. When police arrived, there was no sign of forced entry, no robbery, nothing stolen, just 2 bodies and 2 sons who told the responding officers the killings were related to the mafia. What followed was one of the most watched, most debated, most divisive criminal cases in American history. A first trial that ended in deadlock, a second trial that ended in conviction, life sentences, then 35 years in prison, then Netflix, then new evidence, then resentencing, then parole denied, and now, 5 days from today, a new resentencing hearing that could determine whether Erik and Lyle Menendez ever walk free. The question that has divided America for 35 years is not who pulled the triggers. Both brothers admitted that. The question, the only question, is why. And the answer you believe determines everything. Tonight, the complete case, the night of the murders, the spending sprees that followed, the confession that broke everything open, the abuse claims that changed everything again, the 2 trials, the conviction, the new evidence, the resentencing, and the hearing 5 days from now that America is watching. Every piece of evidence, every argument, both sides, completely and fairly. You decide. Every crime leaves a record. Tonight, we read it. To understand the Menendez case, you need to understand the family, because the mansion, the wealth, and the image of the perfect American family are not background details. They are the center of everything both sides of this case argue about. Jose Menendez was born in Cuba in 1944. He came to the United States as a teenager, attended Southern Illinois University on a tennis scholarship, and built himself into one of the most successful entertainment executives in America. By 1989, he was a senior vice president at RCA Records, overseeing the careers of major artists. He had recently moved to Live Entertainment as its chief executive. He was wealthy, powerful, driven, and by every external measure, enormously successful. The family lived in a 9-room, 9-bathroom mansion at 722 North Elm Drive in Beverly Hills, a property worth approximately $4 million in 1989. They had a tennis court, a pool, and a household staff. Lyle and Erik attended elite private schools. The family took international vacations. They had everything that the American dream promised. What happened inside that mansion, what the family's interior life actually looked like, is the central dispute of the entire case. Prosecutors argued that Jose Menendez was a demanding but loving father, whose sons resented his authority and coveted his wealth. The defense argued that Jose Menendez was a sexual predator who had abused both sons from early childhood, and that the family's perfect exterior concealed decades of private horror. Both versions of Jose Menendez cannot be simultaneously true in their entirety, but they are not entirely incompatible either. The most important thing to understand before the evidence is presented is this. Both versions are argued by people who were not inside that house. Only 4 people knew what happened in that family. 2 of them are dead. 2 of them have every reason to lie. On the afternoon of August 20th, 1989, Lyle and Erik Menendez drove to a Big Five sporting goods store in San Diego and purchased two 12-gauge Mossberg shotguns and ammunition. They used fake names on the purchase forms. They drove back to Beverly Hills. That evening, their parents were in the den. At approximately 10 p.m., the brothers entered the den and opened fire. The entire attack lasted only a few minutes. When it was over, Jose Menendez had been shot 6 times, and Kitty Menendez had been shot 9 times. Both were dead. The brothers drove away, disposed of the weapons at a dumpster in Mulholland Drive, attended a late-night movie, and then returned home. At 11:47 p.m., Lyle Menendez dialed 911. He was crying. He told the operator he and his brother had come home to find their parents shot. When police arrived, there was no sign of forced entry. Nothing had been stolen. The brothers told investigators the murders might be related to the mafia or to their father's business dealings. In the days and weeks following the murders, the brothers' behavior attracted scrutiny that has never fully been explained away. Within weeks of their parents' deaths, Lyle and Erik began spending money at a rate that shocked people around them. Lyle bought a Porsche. He purchased a $1 million restaurant in Princeton, New Jersey. He bought Rolex watches. Erik hired a full-time tennis coach. He wanted to go professional. In the months following their parents' murders, the brothers spent approximately $700,000. They had access to the family estate, estimated at between $14 million and $23 million. Investigators noted something else. Before the murders, the brothers' father had recently updated his will. After the murders, the brothers hired a computer expert to delete that updated will from Jose's computer. The original will, which left the estate to the brothers, was restored. The deleted will has never been fully reconstructed. For 6 months after the murders, investigators suspected the brothers but had no direct evidence. That changed because of a therapist, a patient, and a girlfriend who could not keep a secret. Erik Menendez had been seeing a psychologist named Dr. Jerome Oziel for therapy before the murders. In October 1989, 2 months after the killings, Erik told Dr. Oziel that he and his brother had murdered their parents. Oziel, alarmed by what he had heard, called Lyle Menendez into a subsequent session. During that session, Lyle made statements that Oziel later characterized as threatening. Oziel began secretly recording his sessions with the brothers. Oziel told his mistress, Judalon Smythe, what he had heard. In March 1990, after Smythe and Oziel's relationship deteriorated, Smythe went to the police and told them that Oziel had recordings of the brothers confessing to the murders. Police obtained a warrant, seized the tapes, and arrested Erik and Lyle Menendez in March 1990. A legal battle over the admissibility of the therapy recordings consumed the next 2 years. California's evidence code protecting therapist-patient communications was central to the dispute. The California Supreme Court ultimately ruled that portions of the recordings could be used as evidence, specifically the portions where Lyle had allegedly made threatening statements, which fell outside the protection of therapeutic privilege. With the confession tapes partially admissible, the prosecution had the foundation of its case. The brothers had told their therapist they did it. They had purchased the weapons under false names. They had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars within weeks of the murders. They had deleted their father's updated will. The physical and circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. What the prosecution did not anticipate was the defense. When the first trial began in 1993, the defense presented a claim that nobody had heard before and that fundamentally reframed the entire case. Lyle and Erik Menendez testified that their father, Jose, had been sexually abusing them since early childhood. They said the abuse had been ongoing, escalating, and known to their mother, Kitty,
who they said had failed to protect them. They said they had killed their parents in a moment of terror, believing their parents were about to kill them to prevent the abuse from being exposed. The testimony was graphic, detailed, and delivered over days of courtroom proceedings that were televised nationally. Both brothers wept. Both described specific incidents of abuse in clinical detail. The courtroom and the country watching was divided immediately and completely. Lyle testified that he had written a letter to his cousin Andy Cano months before the murders, a letter that alluded, in coded language, to the abuse he said he was experiencing. That letter was presented as evidence. His cousin testified about receiving it. The prosecution's response was equally direct. They argued the abuse claims were fabricated, invented after the fact to create a self-defense narrative that would justify premeditated murder. They pointed to the premeditation, the drive to San Diego to buy weapons, the false names on the purchase forms, the disposal of the guns afterwards. They argued that a genuine fear of imminent death does not look like a planned weapons purchase the afternoon before the attack. Prosecutors also argued motive. The brothers stood to inherit between $14 and $23 million from their parents' estate. They had already been spending that money within weeks of the murders. Greed, the prosecution argued, not fear, was what drove the shotguns into that den on August 20th, 1989. The first jury could not agree. Separate juries for each brother deadlocked. A mistrial was declared. The case went to retrial.
The second trial, which began in 1995, was a fundamentally different proceeding from the first. The California Supreme Court had ruled that the brothers could not invoke imperfect self-defense, the legal standard that had allowed the first jury to consider manslaughter rather than murder. The abuse testimony was significantly restricted. And critically, Lyle Menendez did not testify at the retrial. Prosecutors had discovered that Lyle had asked a friend and an ex-girlfriend to make false statements on his behalf. His credibility was destroyed before he took the stand. Without the full abuse testimony, without Lyle's testimony, and without the imperfect self-defense instruction, the second jury had a much narrower set of considerations. They convicted both brothers of first-degree murder with special circumstances on March 20th, 1996. On July 2nd, 1996, Judge Stanley Weisberg sentenced both brothers to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was appealed 5 separate times across the following years. 5 different appellate courts reviewed it. 5 times the sentence was upheld. The brothers went to prison. Erik was 25, Lyle was 27. They have been in California State Prison ever since. For nearly 2 decades after the conviction, the case largely faded from public attention. The brothers became fixtures of the prison system rather than of the news cycle. They earned college degrees. They participated in rehabilitation programs. They worked as caregivers for elderly incarcerated individuals in hospice. They mentored other prisoners in education programs. The men who walked into that den with shotguns in 1989 were, by every account of prison officials, model inmates. And then, 30 years after the murders, everything changed again. In May 2023, attorneys for the Menendez brothers filed a habeas corpus petition with the Los Angeles County District Court. The petition asked the court to reconsider the brothers' convictions and sentences in light of what the defense described as new evidence, evidence that had not been available at either trial. The most significant piece of new evidence was a sworn statement from Roy Rosselló, a former member of the Latin boy band Menudo, one of the most popular groups in the world in the early 1980s. Rosselló alleged in his sworn statement that Jose Menendez had sexually assaulted him in the early 1980s when Rosselló was approximately 14 years old. Rosselló said he had gone to the Menendez home, was given a drink, and was assaulted.
He was 54 years old when he made the statement. He had waited decades to come forward. The defense also presented a letter that Erik Menendez had written to his cousin, Andy Cano, months before the murders in 1989. The letter, which the defense argued had not been fully appreciated by the first trial jury, contained language that attorneys said directly referenced the abuse Erik was experiencing. The cousin had testified about the letter at the first trial, but the defense argued new analysis of its contents provided stronger corroboration of the abuse claim than previously understood. District Attorney George Gascon, who reviewed the new evidence in 2024, told CNN that times had changed regarding how the public and courts treat victims of sexual abuse. He said that in 1989 and in the mid-1990s, when the brothers were tried, the cultural understanding of male sexual abuse victims was significantly different. He said, and I am quoting directly, "There is no question that a jury today would look at this case probably very differently than a jury did 35 years ago."
On October 24, 2024, then District Attorney George Gascon formally recommended that a judge re-sentence the Menendez brothers. He cited the complexities surrounding sexual violence and the brothers' continuous rehabilitative efforts during their incarceration. His recommendation, if accepted by a judge, would make the brothers immediately eligible for parole because they were under 26 years old at the time of the murders under California's youthful offender law. 1 month later, Gascon was defeated in the election for Los Angeles County District Attorney by Nathan Hochman. Hochman's position was the opposite of his predecessors. He called the brothers' self-defense claim fabricated. He said they had shown a lack of acceptance of responsibility. He opposed resentencing. He attempted multiple times to withdraw the resentencing motion filed by Gascon. His attempts failed. On May 13, 2025, Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge Michael Jessic resentenced Erik and Lyle Menendez to 50 years to life in prison, making them immediately eligible for parole. Judge Jessic said at the hearing, "I do believe they have done enough over the last 35 years that one day they should get that chance." He also said precisely and deliberately that he was not suggesting they should be released immediately. Kim Kardashian, who had been publicly advocating for the brothers' release, called the resentencing a significant step forward. Family members of Jose and Kitty Menendez, who supported the brothers, wept in the courtroom. Kitty Menendez's sister, Joan Anderson Vandermolen, told reporters, "In the 1990s, the world was not ready to believe boys could be raped. Today, we know better." In August 2025, the California Board of Parole Hearings conducted individual parole hearings for both brothers. The hearings were among the most watched parole proceedings in California history. On August 21st, Erik Menendez appeared before the board via video from prison. After a full hearing, Commissioner Robert Barton denied parole. He cited recent prison violations and what he described as Erik's continued willingness to commit crimes. He said, and I want you to hear these words exactly as he said them, "This is a tragic case. I agree that not only 2 but 4 people were lost in this family." He acknowledged the tragedy of both the victims and the brothers, and he still denied parole. Erik's denial is for 3 years, though he can petition to appear before the board sooner. The following day, Lyle Menendez's parole hearing produced the same result. The board denied his parole, citing repeated cell phone infractions while in prison. Both brothers will be eligible for a second hearing in 2028. Deputy District Attorney Habib Balayan, who argued against the brothers' release, acknowledged at the hearing that the brothers had done great things in prison by starting and participating in rehabilitation programs for others.
He still argued against their release. He called their self-defense claim untrustworthy. He said they had been lying for over 30 years. And now, 5 days from today, the next chapter begins. The resentencing hearing, scheduled for March 20th and 21st before Judge Michael Jessic, will determine what happens next in a case that has refused to reach its final page for 35 years.
It says that on August 20th, 1989, 2 young men walked into a room with shotguns and killed their parents. 15 shots. That is not in dispute. Both brothers have admitted it. It happened. It is the only fact in this entire case that everyone agrees on. It says that what happened inside that family, in the years and decades before that night, is something that only 4 people ever knew completely. 2 of them are dead. 2 of them have spent 35 years in prison, telling a story that a growing number of people, family members, legal experts, a district attorney, and a California judge, now believe deserves to be heard differently than it was heard in 1996. It says that the justice system can change its mind, that a life sentence handed down in 1996 can be reconsidered in 2025. That new evidence, a sworn statement from a victim who waited decades to come forward, can reopen a case that 5 appellate courts had closed. That a judge can look at 35 years of rehabilitation and say one day they should get that chance. And it says this, the entry that sits at the center of this case, and that no amount of legal argument has ever fully resolved. 2 parents are dead. Jose and Kitty Menendez did not survive that Sunday night. Whatever happened inside that family, whatever the truth is about abuse and fear and desperation, Jose and Kitty Menendez were human beings who were shot 15 times in their own home. They deserve to be named. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve to be more than a footnote in a story about their sons. On March 20th and 21st, 5 days from now, a California courtroom will take the next step in a case that began 35 years ago and has never truly ended. I will be covering every development as it breaks. Subscribe to the Guilt Ledger so you never miss the next entry, and drop your answer in the comments. Do you believe the Menendez brothers should be released? Let us have the conversation.